Thank you, Jorge. Quite interesting, everything that you've talked about. You've given us amazing examples that provide a lot of motivation because we can use the inertia that comes from Spain to work. And as you say, we have to have fiber everywhere. And then for digital transformation, it is fundamental. And that's where we are at right now. So we will go to the next part of our summit. Thank you, Jorge. We will carry on with Javier Mojica, the commissioner from the Telecommunications Institute of Mexico, who will speak of the industrial policies and support policies and the national route sheet for TTFH in Mexico. Commissioner, the floor is yours. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for this
y por la oportunidad de dirigir este mensaje en representación
to give this message on representation of the Federal Telecommunications Institute on a topic that is so relevant for today's world, the FTTH. Or as Jorge said, fiber, we have the combination of fiber. Unfortunately, the pandemic, the worldwide pandemic that we have yet to overcome, reminded us of the essential of having digital infrastructure as a cross-cutting tool for society. First, reactionary measures to this sanitary emergency were to keep our social distance, stay at home whenever possible, and something that is always possible, always if we are connected and if we have optical fiber towards the home, that would be better. That is, in the middle of this crisis, mobile and fixed connections became part of our day-to-day routine. They engulf not only entertainment, but also education, work, health, public health, e-commerce, and the access to information. The pandemic showed us what we were going through anyway, that connectivity is central access of commerce and the development of all countries. There cannot be any development without any type of connectivity. After the pandemic hit humanity and we had a lot of contagion and people dying, well, it is not enough to only look back into the past and feel sorry for what we did or did not do, but we need to rise up to the occasion. Churchill said that you should never squander a crisis. This is yet an opportunity to face the challenges. We have used the tools that we have available. Of course, internet access has been essential, but for many other areas, especially those that do not have connectivity, broadband connectivity, digital television, and even radio, AM radio has become extremely important. Radio and television have been media to provide education, to impoverish people in Mexico through the program we call Learn by Home. And it is important to point out that in order to use these type of programming and to provide this type of content to the students, it has been fundamental to have digital television, land digital television, a project that required the efforts from the Telecommunications Secretariat started in 2004 and by other government institutions. This was a project of many years in which we had several authorities participating. The focus was the same, to generate the conditions so that in the future we will have access to the new digital tools. Our bet cannot only be to stay with the tools that we have right now, the broadband tools that we have, but we have to be ready to use the more advanced technologies. For instance, in terms of education, we have to make the most of all the advantages that would provide technologies like 5G, virtual reality even. And in order to generate these conditions, we have to build from today, starting today. Education, as a reference, is just an example. We all know that there is a link between the increase of penetration of broadband and the growth of GDP. rates, as well as other economic variables that have to do with the well-being of the population at large. We at the Telecommunications Institute have to become a facilitator to generate the necessary conditions for investment in infrastructure, digital infrastructure. We have to provide transparency and predictability of the rules of the game, as well as the investment for the new generations, including FTTx. This certainty in the end is fundamental for growth. We also have to provide, other than the certainty, in order to facilitate the deployment. Well, it has been overdiagnosed that the networks and deployment that come from urban infrastructure, well, in this topic, the government entity says that in the deployment of networks, we have to observe everything that has to do with urban development. And the Constitution itself says that urban development is a competency of municipality and local authorities. That means that through actions like microsites of deployment of infrastructure, what we want to achieve at the IFT is to integrate and to spread information through the confirmation of legislation and regulatory efforts that deal directly with the deployment of infrastructure, and they will serve as a source of information for those that will deploy in the future, but would also become a referential for better practices for other local authorities. In this topic, we will continue to work and make efforts to be the mediators of state and municipal affairs, with the objective not only to promote the elimination of necessary barriers for the deployment, but also to recognize the local authorities as relevant stakeholders in this effort for the development and transformation, a digital transformation of the country. As we know, what you can't measure cannot be improved. However, through the implementation of this infrastructure, we will look for detailed information of the reach of these networks, where we have infrastructure or not, both active or passive in nature, something that will be very useful in order to provide better business plans of investment for the governments. This will provide us information as to where we require the infrastructure and what type of infrastructure, passive or active, can be made the most of for the deployment. Thanks to our power as an autonomous entity and our specialization as technicians, we are an impartial arbiter, the objective of which is to effectively develop sectors of telecommunications and without any type of pressure from other levels of government, and without trying to toot my own horn. It is quite useful to remind you that the past few government entities in the past have ranked us on level 19 of 193 positions within the government, and we have advanced ever since 2013. And although we are on the way, we're still aware that there's a lot of that we have to go through. According to OCDE data, between June of 2019 and June of 2020, Mexico was the third member country with the most growth in terms of penetration of fixed broadband, with a growth of 77.4%, and our growth for optical fiber increased by 23%. Regardless, the deployment is below the mean of member countries, with only 20% of connections through broadband and through optical fiber, while Asian countries like South Korea and Japan have rates of 80%, and European countries like Spain and Switzerland have about 70% of penetration. This data is just a sample of the challenge that we have ahead. In this context, the Institute revealed its route sheet, in which we put to the floor the way we are going to face the challenges that are brought about by the digital era. This framework will allow the institution to plan, to focus its efforts in order to achieve, amongst others, the objective to promote the deployment of these networks and make the most of them in order to facilitate the development of the digital ecosystem and will foment digital inclusion. Just as an example, in our 1.1 strategy of the root sheet, we strive to create a regulation framework that will facilitate the deployment and the sharing and the development of new generation networks in the long term, especially in everything related to optical fiber and 4G and 5G technologies. All of these are elements that are vital for the new digital ecosystem. The IFT has bet for boosting the infrastructure of telecommunications, and through this bet, both the regulator and the companies, that is the providers, we're all on the same page. And we will do more infrastructure, we will do a lot more efforts, a lot more FTTH and other competencies and efforts at large to become better. The providers, the operators want to improve their infrastructure to provide more services. And we at the Institute want them to achieve that, because this is what we have to do as our constitutional mandate. I want to thank you for your attention, and I, of course, will wish you the most success in this event. Thank you, Commissioner. Very interesting what you have been saying, the great role that the IFT has performed, and it is hopeful to see that Mexico has grown, but as you say, there's a lot of challenges that we need to tackle in order to deploy the network. We still have a long ways to go, which is fortunate but also unfortunate. However, the pandemic has been a great digital transformation agent, and that has accelerated what we were going through anyway, that is the adoption of these networks. It has facilitated the operation efforts, and we as regulators have a challenge to tackle as well.